Hello everyone and welcome to another one of our Warhammer 40k videos. We don't do these very often, but just the other day, the big FAQ 1 2018 was released. Although I have been affectionately calling it the Adepticon FAQ since it was originally supposed to debut in March, but was delayed thanks to certain information that got learned at Adepticon. So I figure we're going to go through this. We're also going to go through the small Codex updates that occurred in the Astra Militarum Codex and the Codex updates that happened with Index Imperial Armour Astra Militarum. So, without further ado, let's get into this. The following two match play rules were introduced as beta versions back in December of 2017. Based on feedback we've received since then, we have made a few changes to the Psychic Focus rule to prevent disproportionately affecting Grey Knights and Thousand Suns armies. These rules are now in the final form for these two match play rules. Now, the first one is Psychic Focus. With the exception of Smite, each psychic power can only be attempted once per turn, rather than once per Psyker per turn. In addition, unless the Psyker attempting to manifest Smite has either the Brotherhood of Psykers, see Codex Grey Knights, or Brotherhood of Sorcerers ability, see Codex Thousand Suns, you must add 1 to the warp charge value of Smite for each attempt, whether successful or not. It has been made to manifest Smite during a given psychic phase, to a maximum warp charge of value of 11. For example, if an Orc Psyker attempts to manifest Smite during a psychic phase in which 2 other Psykers have already attempted to manifest Smite, then warp charge value of Smite is 7 for the attempt. Note that if the result of the Psyker's psychic test is more than 10, it still inflicts D6 mortal wounds instead of D3 as normal. So this is what we kind of expected. Anybody who was playing Grey Knights or Thousand Suns has been grinding their teeth over this rule for, well, months since they introduced it as a beta rule. Really, I think we knew this change was coming, that there would be some kind of exception or some sort of workaround for those factions that do rely on their mini smite as some sort of force multiplier. So really, this is perfectly aligned, and I'm happy to see this change. I'm also happy to see the clarification on the more than warp charge 10d6 smite damage. For guard, this doesn't affect us too much unless you're running a whole bunch of Primaris Psykers. But yeah, this is definitely a nice inclusion. This will help reduce certain smite spams, and it'll still allow armies that have a very fluffy reason for tons of smite to still be smiting. The next rule, this is a brilliant one. Targeting characters. An enemy character with a wounds characteristic of less than 10 can only be chosen as a target in the shooting phase if it is both visible to the firing model and is the closest enemy unit to the firing model. Ignore other enemy characters with a wounds characteristic of less than 10 when determining if the target is the closest enemy unit to the firing model. This means that if any enemy unit other than characters with a wounds characteristic of less than 10 are closer, whether they are visible or not, then the enemy character cannot be targeted. So basically this just means characters can no longer screen characters. An interesting army that came out shortly before Chapter Approved, and well actually a while before Chapter Approved, was basically an all-character army. You would run a ton of assassins, because according to the original character rules, you could only shoot the closest target, which meant if you had 4 or 5 Caluxus assassins, you could only shoot at them one at a time in sequence until you finally made it past all of the ones with less than 10 wounds. I do know that there are some people who are... the original wording of this rule, way back in Chapter Approved, didn't say wound characteristic, it just said had wounds less than 10, which meant that if you were a character with wounds of more than 10, and you dropped down below 10, you were technically covered by this rule, but they clarified it, and now it says wounds characteristic. They also clarified it in Chapter Approved. I believe there was an FAQ for that. So this rule is pretty well written. It's now set up so that you can't screen characters with other characters, which is something we kind of needed moving forward. And again, another good rule. I'm happy to see both of these beta rules made it in. At my club, we've been using these since Chapter Approved. We've been using these since, I think, possibly before Chapter Approved. Can't quite remember when they initially released the beta for these, but we have been using this for a while, much to the chagrin of the 1000 Suns player. However, he was extremely happy to find out that Psychic Focus gave him a specific exception. So, good on G-dubs here. Beta rules match plays. The following feedback, we are introducing 2 new beta match play rules, Tactical Reserves and Battle Brothers. As with our previous beta match rules, do let us know what you think. Tactical Reserves. The beta version of the Tactical Reserves updates an existing match play rule we presented in the Warhammer 40,000 rulebook, with the ability to arrive on the battlefield mid-game. The ability to arrive on the battlefield mid-game has always been powerful, enabling units that can do so to arrive where they will be most effective, whilst granting them immunity from attacks until they are on the battlefield. The original wording restricts the number of units that can do so to half your army, but the intent was half of your army's strength, so we have further clarified this to be half the power of your army. Even so, armies that use a heavy proportion of reinforcement units are dominating many gaming tables, often decimating their foes on the first turn before their opponent has a chance to move any of their own models. We therefore felt it necessary to rein in this power of these abilities, and so during the first battle round, such units can only be set up within their own deployment zone. This means that to be the most efficient wow, this wording is a little weird. This means that to be the most efficient, such units may want to wait until the second battle round. Note that we have not applied this restriction to gene stealer cults or abilities and stratagems that employed by such armies as the Raven Guard. The opportunity to deploy these units en masse after deployment is a central part of the design of these armies. The official tactical reserves beta rule. Instead of being set up on the battlefield during deployment, many units have the ability to set up on teleportariums in high orbit, in reserve, etc., in order to arrive on the battlefield mid-game as reinforcements. When setting up your army during deployment for a matched play game, at least half of the total number of units in your army must be set up on the battlefield, and the combined power ratings of all the units you set up on the battlefield during deployment, including those that are embarked within transports that are set up on the battlefield, must be at least half your army's total power level, even if every unit in your army has the ability that would allow them to be set up elsewhere. Furthermore, in matched play games, any unit that arrives on the battlefield during a player's first turn must be deployed wholly within the controlling player's deployment zone, even if its abilities would normally let it be set up anywhere. This does not apply to Gene Stealer cult units that have been set up according to the cult ambush ability, or to units that are set up after the first battle round has begun but before the first turn begins, such as those set up via Forward operatives or strike from the shadows stratagems. Finally, any unit that has not arrived on the battlefield by the end of the third battle round in a match play game counts as having been destroyed. So this was a surprise. I didn't expect Games Workshop to address this at all, and honestly, I didn't really view it as much of an issue. Yes, the ability to drop right on top of your opponent, basically in turn one, just outside 9 inches, is hugely powerful, and we all used it. Heck, when I went to Adepticon, one of the detachments in my armies was an Elysian Air Wing detachment, simply so I could put 4 planes in Deep Strike Reserve. I had earlier emailed Adepticon and double-checked to make sure that they would allow me to Deep Strike these flyers without them self-destructing, and had received the go-ahead. And the reason was because you needed to keep your firepower off the table, otherwise it would get annihilated before it had a chance to do anything. This rule seems like a rule without a cause to me. Yeah, first turn Deep Strike is really powerful. However, the only armies that are really, dying to this are gunline armies. And if you're not rolling some form of chaff, I have to think that your army's not really a take-all-comers list anyway. I could be wrong, but the way I view this rule is this isn't needed. This really kind of guts a couple of different armies. One that comes to mind immediately is Elysians, who their entire shtick is Deep Strike, and they don't have any of these special stratagems to allow them to still do it. So I'm not a fan of this rule at all. I've fought armies that can drop on me since, the beginning of 8th edition. It's scary, it's frustrating, but eventually you start to learn workarounds. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Scout Sentinels are so gosh darn important in an Imperial Guard army, to push these Deep Strikers back. You get your Scout move before the match begins, and now suddenly that 9-inch bubble has an additional 9 inches. It's got to be a way giving you an 18-inch defensive bubble. So this rule doesn't seem to make a whole heck of a lot of sense to being there, other than to just restrict players a lot. I know Tau players would not like this rule at all. I mean, they have a lot of units in their army that can Deep Strike, and now that they've been told, oh, you can't do that on turn 1, really seems to be limiting them a lot, and we've already limited Tau players a decent amount. Now, granted, I don't like Tau for the most part. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I love Tau, but I don't like the stereotypical Tau player. But still, I don't get this. I'm not sure why it's here, and I'm not quite happy that it's there, especially since both of the beta rules that were introduced last time both got accepted. I think this is a mistake. I'm happy that they want to try and address the idea of the first turn Deep Strike being able to absolutely gut your army, but I think this might be a bit heavy-handed. I don't want to say that they need to change the distance in which you can drop or make it so you can't charge, because there are some armies that are kind of supposed to be able to charge the moment they drop out of Deep Strike, but this is too heavy-handed. In my personal opinion, I don't think this works all that great unless they're willing to give stratagems to a whole bunch of more armies. What comes to mind immediately is Tyranids. The Tyranids have a couple of units that can deep strike and bring a whole bunch of other units on a deep strike. Now they can't do that, so saving that until turn 2? And granted, it has always been an interesting decision in certain armies whether or not you drop immediately or you drop on turn 2. So, again, I'm not a fan of this. I'm going to have to play with this for a couple of matches. This is going to make army list building a little bit easier since, now you can basically dump your Sentinel defenses right on. So for me, I always use Las Cannon Sentinel, so I get 165 points back. But yeah, not a fan of this rule. Gonna have to play to see how it turns out. I'm not overly concerned, mainly because my army doesn't deep strike a lot. But if you're playing Elysians, if you're playing Tau, if you're gonna play any sort of army that really deep strikes heavily, this kind of sucks. And I can understand why there was a pretty considerable outrage towards it. For me, again, doesn't affect me all that much, but I'm not a fan of this rule at all. The next, Battle Brothers. The beta version of Battle Brothers is a brand new matched play rule we'd like to test. When we originally wrote this edition of Warhammer 40,000, we wanted to make sure that your army could include appropriate allies. For example, in an Imperial army, Imperial Guardsmen and Space Marines should be able to fight side by side, and in a Chaos army, Chaos Space Marines should be able to burn the galaxy alongside their demonic minions. The rules for what units could be included in each detachment were therefore very relaxed, but this has led to some very mixed detachments that include units from far more factions than we originally envisioned. We feel that these esoteric mixed detachments are far better suited to narrative or open play, and so we have decided to trial this rule for matched play games. This means that you can still include appropriate allies, but now they might need to be included in a different detachment. There are a few units in certain index books that would be difficult to include in matched play army following these restrictions, so we've written errata to enable players to more easily include these units in their army. These changes appear in the appropriate FAQ and errata documents, but are shown below for convenience. Battle Brothers. All units in each detachment in your battle-forged army must have at least one faction keyword in common. In addition, this keyword cannot be Chaos, Imperium, Eldari, Ynnari, or Tyranids, unless the detachment in question is a fortification network. This has no effect on your army faction. So, this is a long time coming. And if you don't think this should have been a long time coming, you're probably about to run one of the detachments I'm about to describe. So, like I said, I went to Adepticon, and I would flick through the Best Coast Pairings app that we were using this year in it, and able to look in on certain people's army lists, and you would not believe the number of people who were running, I believe it was a Supreme Command detachment of Rabut Gilliman, the Saint Celestine, and the most confused company commander you've ever done see. And the reason why they did that is because they had Rabute Gilliman, who is super expensive, they had the Saint, who is okay expensive, and they wanted the cheapest filler they could possibly get, which is a 30-point company commander. This is somewhat frustrating, because it really does kind of feel very stupid. It's not fluffy, it's not really kind of useful. They took it as a 30-point tax so they could get this the cheapest possible while still getting points for it. And since Gilliman and the Saint really don't benefit from any sort of, doctrines, and a single company commander in an army filled with nothing other than things like fire raptors doesn't need his doctrine anyway, it was just a space filler. This defeats that, finally. We're finally getting away from those kinds of stupid things. The open detachment rule still means that you're going to run into players claiming they're Blood Angels, but still fielding a battalion of, Imperial Guardsmen who make up the majority of their command points. But hey, this is a step in the right direction. Thank goodness this is here. So far, of the 4 rules that we've gotten, 3 of them are good. 1 of them is kind of weird. And I'm very, very happy to see Battle Brothers finally put in here like this. I'd like to see a couple more restrictions in the terms of what kind of detachments you can combine, but most of that is purely just me being salty because I'm a pure guard commander, and I'm used to seeing, Space Marine players claim they're being Space Marine armies, but really the majority of their army in terms of command points is made up of guardsmen. Anyway, moving on to the next. We now have related errata to the Battle Brothers. At least I think it's to a Battle Brothers. Index Imperium 1, page 87, Damned Legionnaires. Abilities. Add the following ability. Saviors from Beyond. As long as your Warlord is from the Imperium, you can include this unit in a Vanguard detachment, even if that detachment contains no HQ units. However, if you do so, that detachment's command benefits are changed to none. So all of these are basically just the fixes so that things like Vindicare Assassins, Calidus, Army of the Reborn can basically fit into a normal detachment without being truly messed up. I'm gonna read this one just because I don't understand it and I kind of glazed over it. Replace this paragraph with the following: if your army is Battleforged and the warlord for your army is either Yvrain, the Visarch, or Yinkarne, then you can include any of these models in any craft worlds. Harlequins are okay, so it's just their exception for them. So yeah, these are just the related erratas for the Battle Brothers rule, which basically says, hey, if you are one of these specific kinds of units, you can still Battle Brother in even though you don't share a keyword. If you want to look at it, go ahead, check it out in the FAQ for you. Most of this doesn't affect us except for the Vindicare and Coalitus Assassins, and I don't use them anyway. Again, it's just basically, it now creates a special separate category for you to use. Interim Balance Review. Furthermore, to the above match play rules, we have decided to make a number of small errata to enhance the balance in Warhammer 40,000 based on community feedback. As errata, these are effective immediately and detailed below. Detachment Command Benefits. When creating a Battleforged army, the battalion and brigade detachments are seen as not offering enough command points for the number of points you must include. As a result, we will increase the battalion detachment's command benefits to +5 command points, and the brigade detachment as +12 command points. These changes appear in the Warhammer 40k rulebook errata, but are shown below for convenience. And it's just showing which page is changed. Not a fan. I know, that seems weird. I run brigades. Every single army I have ever built and played with, I have run as a brigade. I've built a couple of battalion-only armies, but Asgard, it was easy to fill out a brigade. It was relatively useful to fill out a brigade. But changing it so the battalion is now +5? Combine this with the new Deep Strike rule, which makes me say, do I really need Sentinels? I'm struggling to see the point of the brigade at this point. The brigade was a useful combat formation, but now, why not just take 3 battalions? I'll get 15 points for it, I will have all the normal units that I would have for it, and while it does have some more HQ tax, more chaff is always fine. I'm not sure this change is a good idea, to be perfectly frank, mainly because it makes battalions incredibly powerful. It also means that stratagems are gonna be flying now, because everyone and their cousin could take a battalion. So, personally, not a fan. Now, I may change my mind on this later on, because I fully plan to make a couple of battalion-only detachments relatively shortly, but this really does take the fight out of a brigade, because it is really, really easy for a brigade player to switch over to triple battalions without any real penalty. So, yeah. This is an interesting, I don't want to call it a problem, but this is definitely an interesting development. We'll get into more on that later. Tide of Traitors. The Tide of Traitors stratagem appears to be too effective. As a result, we are changing it so it'll only be used once per battle. This change appears in the Codex Space Marines errata, but is shown here for convenience. So, Tide of Traitors basically allowed you to take a cultist squad, pull them off the field, so long as they were still on the field, and then reset them up, I think anywhere on the field, but it might be only in your deployment zone. So you could take a cultist squad that was down to 1 guy, and bring the whole force of like 30 cultists back. And this is stupid strong, because if you don't go for that complete kill every time, they're coming back and in greater numbers. This is a problem. And I'm very, very happy to see them change the stratagem to only be usable once per battle. That ought to help a little bit, especially for people who weren't taking weapons like, Punisher cannons, who could deal with an entire Tide of Traitors in 1-ish turns. So, good balance change from the Guard perspective. Word of the Phoenix. The Word of the Phoenix psychic power appears to have too low of a warp charge value for its effectiveness. As a result, we are increasing the warp charge to value 8. This means that it blah blah blah. So, thank God. So, Word of the Phoenix has a warp charge value of 8. If manifested, selects one of the following units within 18 inches of your psyker that has not made a soul burst action this turn, a Ynnari infantry or biker unit, or the Yinkarne. So, Word of the Phoenix, if you've never fought the Eldar player, if you've never fought Yvrain Eldar, basically says this unit gets to shoot in the psychic phase. That's how it's used 90% of the time. Because you take a unit called Dark Reapers. Dark Reapers are equipped with a weapon, which I believe is Strength 8, AP minus 3 or 4, and it does flat 3 damage. It has a range of 36 or 48 inches. I'm kind of spacing on this. And the real kicker is, they always hit on 3s regardless of other modifiers. So if you've got a plane, it's hitting you on 3s regardless of the fact that you're hard to hit. If you've dumped a whole bunch of psychic powers into something to make it -2 or even -3, it will always hit you on a 3. If it has moved, it will always hit you on a 3. So, this unit is incredibly frustrating. And a super common tactic we saw, and won the Las Vegas Open, was to take a large unit of Ynnari Dark Reapers, and you put them near Yvraine. And then Yvraine would cast her Word of the Phoenix, which would then allow them to shoot immediately in the psychic phase, and then in the shooting phase they would take another shot. This is stupid strong, especially because it was only Warp Charge 6. The fact they've buffed it up 2 isn't going to help all that much, to be completely honest, because Yvraine already has increase in her normal psychic abilities. But at least it's a step in the right direction, and this is desperately needed, if not more. This psychic power is insanely effective, and I don't think they've gone far enough. Abilities which ignore wounds. Some units have an ability that allow them to ignore damage suffered, and it is possible for some units to gain more than one such ability. These abilities have stacked in an unintended way, and as a result we have changed their interactions such that if a model has more than one such ability, you will only be able to use one of them against each lost wound. This change appears in the Warhammer 40k errata. Related errata, ignoring wounds, add the following as a box out on this page. Ignoring wounds. Some units have abilities that allow them to ignore damage suffered each time it loses a wound. Disgusting resilient, the flesh is weak, tenacious survivor. If a model has more than one such ability, you can only use one of these abilities each time a model loses a wound. This is funny to me because this was specifically FAQ'd to be allowable. If you go back to the Warhammer 40k rulebook FAQ, it says that there's a specific question that says towards the end of the FAQ, if I have more than one of these abilities, do I get to roll multiple times? And the answer is a simple yes. So this is them walking back on that, because I think it was possible with Death Corps of Krieg and Death Riders to get a 4-up, 5-up, 6-up? Like a 4-up armor save, a 5-up feel no pain, and then a 6-up feel no pain? With like a Quartermaster cadre? I think that's what it was. And you could combine things like Disgusting Resilient on your Warlord, so you'll have a 5-up and then a 6-up, and this could get pretty funny. So this is them explicitly walking back on their own policy. It's a good change, honestly, because it was a little ridiculous that you could do this, but yeah, they're walking back on it. Again, another good change. Organized play. Here's where we get into the bugbears. While the organized play events table on page 214 of the Warhammer 40,000 rulebook already restricts the number of detachments players can include in their army, it does not currently do enough to encourage players to take a diverse armies when attending events following these guidelines. As such, we have added an extra column to this table that limits the number of times the same unit can be included in an army when attending an organized event. This change appears in the Warhammer 40,000 rulebook errata, but is shown here for convenience. Related errata, page 214, organized events. Replace the following box out with the following. And we're going to ignore this because we don't need to bother with this. Points limits. If you are playing up to 1,000, you get 2 detachments in your army. And you play on a battlefield size of 4x4. The game length is up to 2 hours. If you have 1,001 to 2,000 points, 3 detachments in your army. Play on a 6x4 table, lasting 2 to 3 hours. So this is standard play for most people. 2,000 to 3,000, up to 4 units per army. On an 8x4 table, 3 or more hours. The number of times each datasheet can be included is brand new, and we will express the star right now. This does not apply to units with the troops or dedicated transport battlefield roles, nor does it apply to any units that are added to your army during the battle that cost reinforcement points. In a 1,000-point game, a unit's datasheet can only appear twice in your army. In a 2,000-point game, only 3 times can a datasheet show up in your army. And in a 3,000-point game, 4 times may a datasheet show up in your army. What does this mean? Well, for one, if you ever played like 9 Flying Hive Tyrants, you're screwed. Although I think you were screwed anyway because I believe they changed it to 1 per detachment. If you are a fan of taking 5 units of tanks, you can't do that anymore. If you are a fan of taking multiple veteran squads beyond 3, you cannot do this anymore. If you wanted to take more than 3 company commanders, you cannot do that anymore. This is dumb. Now, why is this dumb? The reason why this is stupid is because this really hurts fluffy armies. If somebody wants to run a large number of infantry, for example, they can't do it anymore. Now, I'm not talking about just running infantry squads. I'm talking about all the supporting elements. Multiple commissars, multiple company commanders, multiple astropats. The limiting of this is really painful to an army like the Guard, who tend to bring a lot of stuff because it's affordable and our units on their own aren't all that good. This won't affect Space Marines all that much. This won't affect really the power armies all that much. But if you want to run fluffy, you're screwed. Now, why is this here? Mortar spam. That's probably about 30% of the reason why this is here is mortar spam. In Adepticon, I believe I saw one group that had something in the order of roll 36d6 because of the number of mortars they had brought, because mortars were 33 points. This also sort of preemptively goes after people who are trying to spam commanders. The Flying Hive Tyrant spam. It was 9 Flying Hive Tyrants, or 8 Flying Hive Tyrants, something like that. And they had to make an individual rule for it. Tau Commander spam. They made a specific individual rule for this. This is them deliberately going in and trying to limit the number of units you can have. And we know this because number of detachments, 2. Maximum in your army, 2. 3, 3, 4, 4. This is specifically them trying to say, hey, if you're going to bring a unit, you only get one of that unit per detachment. Which, again, is really, really dumb. Especially on the Guard, this is hard on Guard. Because we need a lot of orders if we run heavy numbers of infantry. And we are now down to 6 order-giving units aside from named characters. That is 3 company commanders and 3 junior officers. Which means in total we have 9 orders for our entire army, which for a lot of people that's more than enough. However, if you run a super infantry heavy unit with 150 infantry, you're boned, and there's no getting around that fact. If you like to run multiple Layman Russ groups in separate areas, you're screwed. Now it's not so bad for us because we can squadron our vehicles. We can bring 3 Layman Russes per 1 unit chart. So we can still get around that. However, if you want to be fast, open, and loose, you're going to have to go to Forge World to start bringing Forge World data sheets because they're technically separate from the normal Layman Russ MBTs. So this is not good in my opinion. This is a way overreaction. This really, really hurts certain armies. Sisters of Battle, for example, they like to use a lot of Dominions because Dominions are strictly better than their infantry. They can't do that anymore. They get 3 and they're done. If you want to bring a bunch of Penitent engines, you can't do that. 3, you're done. If you want to bring a whole bunch of Earthshakers, well, you gotta squadron them all up. That means putting them right next to each other and easy to assault and kill. If you wanted to bring infantry only, you can't do it anymore because you only get 3 heavy weapons teams in the entire army. If you want to play Elysians, you are totally screwed. Because not only can you no longer deep strike on top of somebody in the first turn, you've only got 3 of every unit except for infantry, which is a huge problem in an Elysian army. They just don't get enough stuff. So it was already hard to play them because they're kind of overcosted and undergunned. This is a way overreaction. I'm not happy about this at all. I really hope they walk this back or drastically expand it or be more specific. Because there are too many armies that kind of rely on the same of a single type of unit because they don't have huge unit varieties. The Guard gets away with this to a certain extent, and we're going to see why certain things changed in a little bit. But there are some armies out there where you're just screwed. So, and this just increases souping even more. So, especially if you play one of those armies like Sisters of Battle, like Custodes, although Custodes were always going to soup, then you need to bring in other armies along with you. Otherwise, you're just not going to be able to make up your points without playing some really stupid off-meta things. And I'm not saying that you can't play stupid off-meta things, but a lot of us like to play at least a modicum of competitive. So this is a bad change. This is an overreaction, an absolute total overreaction to things like fly run spam, heavy weapon spam. There should have been a better way to do this. There is a better way to do this. And I'm really disappointed that they just ham-handed threw this at the wall. I'm happy that well, no, this isn't even a beta rule. This is a change to the errata. So you got to play with this if you want to play in a competitive environment. So if your club plays competitive and you play one of those armies like Sisters of Battle, you're not competitive anyway, but at least you had some fun with it. Now you're stuck with this. And I think there was a Sisters of Battle player that made it into the top 10 at LVO. So This is not good. This is an overreaction, plain and simple. It just punishes you if you want to try and bring a whole bunch of the same unit, especially if you have a small army that doesn't have a whole ton of different kinds of units. So, moving on. Interim points reviews. Whenever we publish a new edition of Chapter Approved or a new Codex, we review and update and fine-tune the points values of all our dataships. Following your feedback, several units in particular have come to our attention as needing a points rebalance, and we have felt it best to publish these revised rules as soon as possible. As a result, if the points for the unit appear on one of the tables below, they replace those that appear in any book published before April of 2018. These updated points value also appear in the Chapter Approved 2017 errata and will be published in the Chapter Approved 2018 alongside the comprehensive annual review of all points values. We're going to go over the Astra Militarum ones because these are the ones we know. Unit Commissar. Models per unit, 1. Points per model, which does not include war gear, 15 points. Lord Commissar, 30 points. Oh, God. This is good. This is needed, and this is good. I'm still probably not going to take them, but finally. This puts the points of a Commissar and a Lord Commissar at 16 and 31 points, because you have to take a bolt pistol. You can't not take a bolt pistol unless you play Death Korps of Krieg, in which case you don't got to take a bolt pistol. Finally, the Commissar is much more in line with his cost, and something else changed in the Astra Militarum Codex. We'll go over that, and we'll come back to this. Fire Raptors went way the hell up. I believe it's a 90-point increase, which, thank God, the number of people who are running 2 and 3 Fire Raptors at Adepticon was stupid. And Robote Girly Man has gone right back up. Dark Reapers are now up to 12 points. And pretty much everything in the Dark Reapers, Farseers, Spirit Seers, Warlocks, and Warlock Conclaves all went up as needed. Dark Reapers are still too powerful. The main issue with them was not addressed. And, yeah, they need to go up. Also over here, Death Korps Commissar, 15 points. Death Korps Rider Commissar, 35 points. Again, a 15-point drop from all their normal one. Death Korps Rider Commissars were 50 points, and normal Death Korps Commissars were 15, which means the Death Korps Commissar is still the cheapest unit because he doesn't have to take a bolt gun. And it does not look like the Lord Commissar for the Elysians has gone down, unless he's on the next page. Nope, there's no next page. So, Elysians, again, you're boned a little bit. But everything else, Lord Commissars and Commissars have gone down. Sly Marbo, 65 points. He's still too expensive for him. Don't take him. Alright, so that was the Adepticon FAQ. Codex Astra Militarum. Everything in magenta is all we're going to go over. We're not going to go over anything else because there's a lot of stuff. You've already read it. But the magenta stuff is brand new. Summary Execution. The first time an Astra Militarum unit fails a morale test during the morale phase, whilst within 6 inches of any friendly Commissar, you can execute a model. If you do, one model of your choice in that unit is slain and the morale test is re-rolled. Do not include the slain model when re-rolling the morale test. So, Summary Execution used to be one of our most useful abilities. We always took it because it was amazing. It basically read that only one unit could be killed from failing a morale check. You still failed the morale check, which was weaker than previous editions, because in previous editions it was you killed one unit, you passed the morale check. Now, when it changed, it was you failed the morale test, but only one guy can run away, and that's the guy your Commissar shot. When they changed it, like a week or 2 weeks right after our Codex came out, they said that when you failed a morale check, you did execute. Now they've changed it to you can execute. So summary execution is now optional. Thank God. This was needed, this was essential, and combined with the points change, Commissars could be back. We now have 31-point Lord Commissars, which means a leadership bubble. It's a 6-inch leadership 9 bubble, which, when combined with other benefits, Cadians and Mordians right off the bat are going to be leadership 10. Throw in a banner, we're leadership 11. So this is a good change. This is not the change I want, because I want the change to go all the way back to the way it was when we originally got our Codex. But this is a desperately needed change. You may start to see Commissars on the battlefield, because now, when they situationally become important, we have the option to do this. And with a massive price drop, we can start including commissars in our armies without too much trouble, since it's now the cheapest point fill for the elite category. Astropaths are still better, but since, we're limited to 3 astropaths, we're going to have to make use of commissars and lord commissars to fill out our HQ and elite slots if we're just trying to sneak by the least amount of points here. Page 93, Infantry Squad Unit Composition and War Gear. Add the following bullet point. A heavy weapons team is armed with a lasgun and frag grenades. This is something we've needed in our FAQ since the bloody Codex came out. You see, in infantry squads and veterans and command teams, when you took a heavy weapons team, you didn't know whether or not you still had a lasgun and frag grenades, because all it said was 2 units may form a heavy weapons team and have one of the following weapons. So logic dictated that you would look at the heavy weapons teams category, which said that every heavy weapons team had a lasgun, frag grenades, and their heavy weapon. But now, our infantry, it's clear in black and white, or in this case magenta and white, that our heavy weapons teams are armed with lasguns and frag grenades. And the same deal with veteran units. A veteran heavy weapons team is armed with a lasgun and frag grenades. Thank you. Finally, it only took you, almost a year. Thank you for something. We needed that. So we've got 2 thank you for somethings. Militarum Tempestus Command Squad War Gear options. Okay, again, I'm going to read this. Important. Militarum Tempestus Command Squad War Gear options. Change the first and second bullet points to read. One model may either replace his hotshot lasgun with a hotshot las pistol and a voxcaster, or take a hotshot las pistol and a voxcaster in addition to their hotshot lasgun. One other model may either replace his hotshot lasgun with a hotshot las pistol and a medipack, or take a hotshot las pistol and a medipack in addition to their hotshot lasgun. Now, I've seen some people immediately say, yay, I can finally take hotshot lasguns on my voxcasters. You need to keep in mind, this is, you take the hotshot lasgun and the hotshot las pistol. So the price of your voxcasting team has gone up a point if you want to field them with the hotshot lasgun, because they have to take the pistol and they have to take the hotshot lasgun. So just make sure when you're building lists, if you're taking Sky and Command squads with this, you must take both. Also, this only says command squads. So I don't run Scions. I don't necessarily know if the normal Scion infantry squad carries a voxcaster, but if so, they don't get this option. It's dumb. Yeah, I think it was just a small mistake, and they will change that shortly, but I just want to make sure that's clear. Page 118 to 125, the Baneblade, Banehammer, Banesword, Doomhammer, Hellhammer, Shadowsword, Stormlord, and Storm Shadow. Steel Behemoth, change the third sentence to read, it can, except when firing Overwatch, also still fire its weapons if an enemy unit are within 1 inches of it, but only its Twin Heavy Bolter or Twin Heavy Flamer can target units that are within 1 inches of it. Its other guns must target other units. Basically, you can't Overwatch with your Baneblades while already locked in close combat. That's the main point of this change. Oh, this is a tragedy. This made me... I didn't cry, but I want to say for dramatic effect I cried. This is the end of a glorious era. Crush them. Change the first sentence to read, use the stratagem at the start of your charge phase. On the Crush Them card and in the Codex, it says, at the start of the charge phase. So basically, when the enemy term came up, if we had a Baneblade, or really any vehicle that we just wanted to screw with our opponent, we would immediately play Crush Them. Why? Because it allowed our vehicles to hit on 2s, and we could use this on their turn. It was hilarious. It was amazing, and now we can't do it. I expected this to happen a long time ago. I'm kind of sad this happened, but hey, it's something we're going to have to deal with. This is probably a balance change that's fine, but I'm not happy about it, purely because I'm guard. But again, in 100% fairness, this is probably fine. Still annoying, because now our Baneblades don't get to countercharge the enemy, essentially. But yeah, we no longer get to charge them on their charge phase. It's only ours now. Page 136, Overlapping Fields of Fire. Change the rules text to read, use this stratagem after a Cadian unit from your army has attacked an enemy unit in the shooting phase, and the attack resulted in the enemy unit losing 1 or more wounds. Add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made by other Cadian units from your army that target the same enemy unit in this phase. I don't play Cadians. I'm going to be 1,000% honest with you. I play catechins pretty much exclusively. I believe overlapping fields of fire didn't require you to actually cause a wound. I think it just required you to shoot at them. But this is the new change. So that sucks, if that's the case. I've been hearing a lot of Canadian players saying, oh my god, this is such a bad nerf. I'm willing to believe them, and if that's what this change is, ow, I feel sorry for you guys really badly, because that's painful. Again, this is designed to go after soup players who like to bring in, just random toss-in Cadians just to fill out their army. It's not really targeted at actual Cadian players who run pure Astra Militarum groups. It's always painful to see the guard get weakened in any way, and I feel for you, Cadia. We will hold a vigil at some point. Page 140, Grand Strategist. Change the second and third sentences of the rules text to read, in addition, if your army is battle-forged and this warlord is on the battlefield, roll a d6 for each command point you spend to use a stratagem. On a 5-up, the command point is immediately refunded. I think this is just a clarification, because I'm pretty darn sure that's what the rule is anyway. At least that's how I've been playing with the rule since I started playing with the rule. Which is, by the way, every single army I've ever fielded. Literally, I've never not used Grand Strategist except in the combat patrols I played at Adepticon because they didn't allow you to use Grand Strategist. So basically, this is just a clarification for anybody who was trying to say, no, you only get 1 point back, but you get to roll 2 dice for it. There are those people out there. They are that guy. You may ignore them now because it is now 100% clear exactly what Grand Strategist does. Every single command point you spend, you get to roll a dice for, and on a 5-up, you get it back. So don't let anybody at your club try and tell you otherwise. Oh, looks like there was a little bit down here. Cur of Aquila, change the second sentence of the rules text to read, whilst the bearer is on the field, roll a d6 each time your command point uses a stratagem. Again, that's exactly what it's always done. On a 5-up, you'll get it back. So every time your opponent uses a stratagem, even if it counts 2 command points, 3 commands, doesn't matter, you get to roll 1 dice. On a 5-up, you get it back. Again, this is just clarifying things and making sure whilst the bearer is on the field. The Relic of Lost Cadia finally got its proper clarification to do what we all thought it would do. Once per battle, the bearer can unveil this relic at the start of any turn. There were some people who were trying to claim you could do this infinitely because it had the bearer can unveil this relic at the start of any turn. It didn't have the once per battle, so it's about time that the Relic of Lost Cadia finally got properly set up. Again, fair dues. Yeah, it's a nerf. But anybody who was playing that I could reveal this every single turn, you were probably playing that guy. That was kind of bullshit. So finally, we have clarification. FAQs. How many dice does the Brutal Strength Regimental Doctrine allow me to reroll when a vehicle in my army fires a ranged weapon that makes a random number of attacks? Is it 1 die per vehicle or 1 die per weapon? Answer. You can reroll 1 dice per weapon. I have seen some players try and make the argument that this means that if you have a Catechin Layman Russ, which has the Brutal Strength Regimental Doctrine, can only now reroll 1 shot die instead of both shot dies because Grinding Advance allows us to fire our gun twice so long as we haven't moved more than half our movement speed. This is not correct. This is just a clarification saying that every time you fire a weapon that has a random number of shot generation, you can reroll 1 of its dice. Because there were some people trying to claim that we could only roll 1 dice on a vehicle, even if we had multiple weapons with a random number of shots, i.e. a Fireball Layman Russ with 3 heavy flamers and a main cannon. You get to roll for every single time you shoot. You get to reroll 1 dice for every weapon that you shoot, but every single weapon that you shoot, you get to roll. And since Grinding Advance is a separate shooting attack, you get to roll both times. You need to pay attention to what's being asked in this question because that's how it's set up. If anybody's trying to claim that you can't, that's the interpretation that is the correct one. And I am going to say it is the correct one. You're rolling once per weapon that fires, and the gun fires twice, so you get to roll for it. It's 2 separate shooting attacks. That's the key thing that allows us to roll twice. Now, if it said you may double the dice that you roll, we would only be able to roll once, but it's not. It's 2 separate attacks that must target the same target. It is explicit in Grinding Advance. So anybody who's trying to pull that crap over you, bring them back to this, reference them to this video, just pull out the rules. It's pretty darn clear. How How do the Laurels of Command and Superior Tactical Training interact? For example, my Warlord is a Cadian Company Commander, and I give him the Laurels of Command and the Superior Tactical Training Warlord trait. How many orders is he potentially allowed to issue each turn, and how many units can those orders affect? If he issues an order to a Cadian infantry unit within 6 inches, Unit A, using his Voice of Command ability, first roll a dice for Superior Tactical Training. On a 4-up, you can pick another Cadian infantry unit, Unit B, within 6 inches for that order to effect. Then roll a dice for the Laurels of Command. On a 4-up, he can issue a second order to the first unit, Unit A. You can then roll again for Superior Tactical Training. On a 4-up, you can pick another Cadian infantry unit wholly within 6 inches for a second order to effect. This does not have to be Unit B, but can be. Note that when you use Superior Tactical Training, an order is not issued. Rather, an already issued order affects an additional unit. So you cannot use the Laurels of Command to generate further orders as a result of using Superior Tactical Training, but you can use Superior Tactical Training to make secondary orders caused by the Laurels of Command affect an additional unit. Thank God this was clarified, because the Laurels of Command and Superior Tactical Training has always been weird. This is probably the best way they could have explained it, and it's still complicated as hell. At some point, Games Workshop should make a flowchart for this, but thank God they used the Unit A and B comparison, and then the parentheses basically make this all 100% clear. So, if you at any point come into confusion with this, have a copy of this, go through the steps bit by bit slowly, just like I read it. I read it slowly for a reason, because I have trouble processing this, and I've reread this about 500 times. It's one of the reasons I don't play Cadians. So that's the Astra Militarum. And now, index forces of the Astra Militarum Imperial Armour. Just for a couple of small minor changes, and by small minor I mean a few. Alright, magenta. Tantalus Battery, Automated Artillery, change the penultimate sentence to read. I like how they used penultimate instead of second to last. If there are none of the specified types of units in range or line of sight, the closest visible enemy unit of any kind must be targeted. Okay, so we get to shoot beyond what we'd normally be able to shoot, I suppose. Arcurian Pattern Stormblade, Arcurian Pattern Stormhammer, Storm Sword. This model does not... all of the behemoths. This model does not suffer the penalty to hit rolls for moving and firing its heavy weapons. This model can fall back in the movement phase and still shoot and or charge this turn. It can, except when firing Overwatch. This is the change that was made. Also still fire its weapons if any enemy units are within 1 inch of it, but only its Twin Heavy Bolter or Twin Flamers can target units that are wholly within 1 inch of it. Other guns must target other units. In addition, this model only gets a bonus to its save for cover if at least half of the model is obscured for the fire. Again, this is just an update to make sure, hey, you're not allowed to shoot Overwatch if you're in close combat. Which doesn't... I'm going to say it doesn't make sense, because the size of a Baneblade is so ridiculously huge. But you know what? For consistency's sake, basically all they're doing is they're making sure if you're in close combat, you don't get to shoot out of close combat unless you're Noise Marines, and a couple of other specific exceptions. The Krieg list has expanded. You can now get to take Gorgon Heavy Transporters and Trojan Support Vehicles, so good on ya. War Gear. The Krieg now can dual wield. I don't know why this change was made, but if you want to, you may now have 2 bolt pistols, 2 las pistols, or 2 hotshot las pistols. A model that takes one of these options cannot take an item from the melee weapons list. So if you really feel the need to be dual wielding bolt pistols, and hey, I can understand the appeal, you can do that now in a Krieg army. Yeah. Summary and execution, this is the update. You now may execute if you desire. You are not required to. Over here in the Elysian drop troop section, the War Gear ranged weapons list has changed. It has a bolt gun, as always, and now the shotgun's on the ranged weapons list, and this is my favorite, the las gun and auxiliary grenade launcher. Oh god, I love this. Every single sergeant, by the way, it's free, we'll get to that, but this weapon is free. I'm going to talk about this weapon now. Screw it, I love this weapon. So, anybody who can take from the ranged weapon list may take this, a las gun with an auxiliary grenade launcher. It has a points cost of 0. It is free. Therefore, every single Elysian drop trooper sergeant now has a lasgun with an auxiliary grenade launcher, unless you're crazy and you're taking a bolt gun. Actually, no, you can take the bolt gun. You're going to take this. The reason why you're going to take this, the auxiliary grenade launcher ability says that your grenade range is now 24 inches. And all Elysians carry frag and crack grenades. Basically, every single Elysian squad has just received, for free, a grenade launcher. Now, granted, your sergeant can no longer fire his lasgun, boo-hoo, but he now has a crack grenade if he wants to shoot it at 24 inches, and a frag grenade that he can shoot at 24 inches. This was desperately needed. This effectively makes an Elysian drop troop squad 5 points more expensive than a guardsman squad, because an equivalent guardsman squad would be 45 points. So Elysian drop troop squad, a full squad is 50, a normal guardsman squad is 40, a guardsman squad with a grenade launcher is 45, so upgrade. This has made Elysian drop troops infantry a little bit better. Doesn't help the fact that they've basically been completely gutted with the deep strike problem, but hey, this is the coolest change ever. I want this to go army-wide because this would be amazing. Please do, G-dubs. I want this. Curse of Mutation. I don't know anything about these guys. I'm not going to bother with Renegades. I'm sorry. If you're looking for Renegades, I can't help you. I don't know anything about them. Elysian drop troops, again, auxiliary grenade launcher, 0 points, which means it's free. A model with an auxiliary grenade launcher increases the range of any frag and crack grenades they use to 24 inches. Free grenade launchers for everyone. Time for a whole bunch of FAQ sections. Also, if you were wondering, the Mukali Riders are back. They're basically camel infantry. It's hilarious. So we'll go through the FAQs real quick. The Death Corps of Kriegs, Elysian drop troops, and Renegades and Heretics armies each list numerous units that can be taken from Index Imperium 2. Do these units have to be taken from Index Imperium 2, or can they be taken from Codex Astra Militarum instead? If a unit appears in Codex Astra Militarum, you must use the datasheet from there. This is important. It is important. We have to do that. Even if you don't necessarily want to. But this also protects us from that guy saying, hey, it says that you have to take from Imperium 2. No. We must take the most recent codex, which is always what was intended, which is what 99.9% of all players would do, but there was on occasion that one guy who would say, nuh-uh, that's not what it says. Now it does. Can Death Corps of Krieg and Elysian drop troops be taken as a detachment of Brood Brothers as part of a Genestealer cult army? If so, do they replace any keywords or abilities? Yes, in these cases you replace Death Corps of Krieg or Elysian drop troops keyword with Brood Brothers in all instances on these units' datasheet. Furthermore, if a unit has the Brood Brothers keyword, it cannot use the Cult of Sacrifice and aerial drop abilities. So basically, you'll never take these guys, because you lose the only reasons you would take these guys. Cult of Sacrifice means that you don't have to take morale tests from shooting, and aerial drop is the only reason anybody ever took Elysians. So yeah, basically, you're never going to see a Death Corps or Elysian drop infantry as a Brood Brother. Apparently, they are now practically immune to the Genestealer parasite. If I issue an order to an artillery battery's crew, for example, the crew of a heavy mortar or Earthshaker carriage battery, does the effect of the order also apply to the artillery piece? No. Gonna admit, not too happy about that. I think it's kind of dumb. Mainly because, why the hell am I paying additional points for a weapon that is now clearly and 100% inferior? You have to pay 120-something points for the Earth Carriage Battery over the cost of the 105-point Basilisk, which is the same bloody gun and a heavy bolter. So if I can't even issue orders to the infantry, what's the darn point? This is a clarification that is just going along with what they originally intended, but I still think it's stupid, because there's literally no reason to ever field these darn things. I don't get it. What is the point of the Earth Carriage Battery anymore? They've basically priced anybody out of it, which is annoying because it's really fluffy in things like Death Corps of Krieg armies. I've got a real good friend, Mitch. He plays Death Corps of Krieg. He loves his Kriegers. Absolutely adores them. He plays them because he likes the World War I style aesthetic. He wants to use Earthshaker batteries. It's a bad choice. It's a flat-out bad choice because he's paying way too much for the weapon. But hey, G-Dubs needs to eventually come back and fix that. Soon. Please, G-Dubs. There was no problem with the cheap Earthshaker carriage battery before because it was vulnerable because of the infantry. That's enough whining about that, but I still think it needs to be changed. There is no datasheet for the Rise of Pattern Layman Rust Vanquisher. Is there a datasheet I should use for this unit? Use the Layman Rust Stygius Vanquisher datasheet from Imperial Armour Index Forces of the Astra Militarum. Replace the unit's coaxial Stormbolter with a coaxial heavy stubber. This is identical in terms of points and profile to the heavy stubber. That's not true. The coaxial storm bolter is rapid 2. The heavy stubber is 3 shots. And replace the heavy stubber with storm bolter on the coaxial weapon ability. Basically, they're just saying you can use it, just change what its gun is. The classic Storm Sword model from Forge World has 2 side sponsons, each with twin heavy bolters, but without las cannons. Is there a datasheet I should use for this unit? Use the Storm Sword datasheet from the Codex Astra Militarum. Replace the unit's option for 2 or 4 sponsons, each with a las cannon and twin heavy bolter, or a twin heavy flamer with 2 sponsons, each with a twin heavy bolter. What? Replace the unit's option for 2 or 4 sponsons, each with a las cannon and twin heavy bolter or twin heavy flamer with 2 sponsons, each with... So basically the Shadow Sword now has an additional weapons option, so long as you model it. I don't like that, not necessarily because I don't like the fact that you can now take this. I don't like this from a perspective of, this is now a unit option, and it's chucked in the back of an FAQ for a supplement book. I would prefer if they had just said, no, you can't use it anymore. And I know that seems like anathema, considering I'm generally the guy who says I hate it when Games Workshop tells me I can't do that anymore. I'm not on board with this change purely from just the neatness of the book's perspective. But I understand why it happens, because they don't want to completely invalidate Forge World more than they already did with Chapter Approved. Passengers disembark from an Elysian drop troops Valkyrie on the same turn it is set up on the battlefield using the aerial drop ability. Yes, but the Valkyrie counts as having moved more than 20 inches for the purposes of its grav chute insertion ability. 2 things. 1, confirms Valkyries can aerial drop, which was obvious in rules as written, and now tells us it's also rules as intended. There was some confusion on that matter. However, it hasn't quite clarified whether or not dropping units like planes using the aerial drop ability kills them immediately or not if they're not hovering. It kind of lends more credence towards the argument that they're counted as moving more than 20 inches. But again, they haven't made a specific, statement on this, and I really feel that they need to. And the final part, what datasheet should I use for the Mukali Riders? It is an unfortunate truth that we cannot continue to indefinitely to sell and support every model we've ever made. As we make new models and new books to explore their background and rules, we have to stop producing and featuring some older models. But just like many of you, we still treasure our collections of older miniatures, and we want to be able to use them in games and Forge World glorious narratives on the tabletop. As such, the datasheet for the Mukali Riders can be found below, but it is intended to be used in an open play or narrative gameplay and is not designed or approved for use in match play games. The unit won't, for example, have any points values. And if you desperately wanted the Camel Riders back, they're here. Enjoy. They're basically, I think, Death Riders? Yeah, they look like the Talarn Death Riders, and I say that purely because Stomping Feet is strength 5. But yeah, so that is the 3 FAQs that we're going to go over. The indexes, Forces of the Astra Militarum, Imperial Armour, the Codex Astra Militarum, and the big FAQ, which I lovingly refer to as the Adepticon FAQ because it was delayed by Adepticon. Overall, I think it's a bonus. Overall, I think we have come out ahead of where we were. We've clarified a whole bunch of rules in our Codex. We have made some moves that kind of needed to be made. We've properly implemented the Psychic Focus and Targeting Characters rules. I think a lot more good than bad came out of this. There are some questionable decisions like tactical reserves, and there is one outright bad decision in the number of data sheets that can be included in an army. But other than that, I think we came out pretty decently well. I do want to see more changes. I want to see this, I just want to see this gone. Or at least better tweaked so that it doesn't completely neuter certain small force armies. But other than that, we came out pretty good. Hey, maybe I missed an angle on this and you guys have a better idea. I don't think I did, but hey, tell me what your thoughts on these 3 FAQs are. Did Games Workshop go too far? Did they not go far enough? What are the major glaring errors that you see, and how would you fix them? I'm really interested to find out what you guys think, because I always want to know sort of what the general Warhammer community is thinking when it comes to anything that Games Workshop does. So leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I've been Tirak. If you like what you've been seeing, hit that like button, and maybe subscribe. We generally don't do a whole heck of a lot of Warhammer content, just when they do major updates like this. We mainly do things like Star Trek, but hey, we do on occasion branch out to come into 40k because it is something so near and dear to my heart. And yeah, if you like the kind of content, hit that like button, maybe subscribe. Hit that little bell icon if you want to receive notifications every single time I release one of these videos, and I will see you all in the next episode.